So I'm delighted to move to our next speaker coming up on the stage, Debra Schwartz from the MacArthur Foundation. So those of you that have been with us for a little while have heard Liesl Pritzker-Simmons from the Blue Haven Initiative and Sam Bonzi talking about catalytic capital and how Liesl is integrating that into her work, and especially now in sort of COVID times, how it's an important piece of the puzzle for her. So Debra Schwartz at the MacArthur Foundation has really been leading some of the thinking on catalytic capital. And those of you that were at SOCAP, when we could convene all together back in September, October last year, will have seen and heard this. So Debra has been supporting the Catapult's Future Fest and the Catapult Cloud through its transition this year. And we wanted to use this opportunity to share more about their work at the MacArthur Foundation with a broader audience, especially sort of here in Europe, that may not know the MacArthur Foundation so well. So Debra, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your support of today. I will leave you on the stage to our Catapult Cloud audience, and I will catch up with you in 20 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Allison. I'm really excited to join you and Catapult Cloud. MacArthur is really pleased to sponsor this important convening, and I congratulate you on navigating all of the new challenges that we face of getting together virtually. So with needs and challenges in the world rising rapidly like never before, really in every area, from health to hunger, jobs to education, housing, access to capital, we know that impact investing has never mattered more. And we also know that risk and uncertainty and urgency are off the charts. So we know too that our response demands a particular form of impact investing, and that's catalytic capital. So what I want to explain and share with you is why we believe, and our collaborators in something called the Catalytic Capital Consortium, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Omidyar Network, why all of us believe that crisis, like the one we face, is really a definitive use case for catalytic capital. Now, last week, the Global Impact Investors Network launched something called the R3 Coalition, which you might have heard about. And if not, I invite you to visit the GIN website to learn more. The aim is to accelerate impact investing with a three-part goal: to respond swiftly and with deep impact, to foster a meaningful recovery, and third, to rebuild and reinvent our institutions, our enterprises, and markets to be more resilient now and in the future. Response, recovery, resilience. My foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, supports this effort and embraces these goals wholeheartedly. And we are absolutely clear that this hard and essential work demands capital that can fill gaps, build bridges, and unlock other funds by being flexible, patient, and above all, risk tolerant. In short, we need catalytic capital now more than ever before. So I want to take a second to provide just some quick background, and then I'll use the rest of this time to share some examples of catalytic capital that's at work and having an impact today. I want to then close with a few thoughts about the longer term and bigger picture. Now, it would be great if you could also join me and Isabel Juilliard-Thompson just about an hour from now, and we'll have an interactive Q&A session that's listed on the schedule. I'm really excited to see how this platform can give us a chance for some live exchange. I also want to invite you to visit MacArthur's website, which is www.macfound.org. There you can read about all of our impact investing work, which we've pursued for almost 4 decades in our home community of Chicago, in concert with other programs such as Climate Solutions, and around the world in various ways. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter, and there will be some new announcements that we'll be making in the coming weeks and months about new impact investments. So please do think about signing up. Now, by way of background, the MacArthur Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Omidyar Network, as I mentioned, launched a global initiative called the Catalytic Capital Consortium last year. Our aim is to build awareness, understanding, and ultimately increase the use of catalytic capital. And we're super excited that Catapult has included this topic in the agenda for today's convening. And as Allison noted, you heard from some other leaders in the field, Liesl Pritzker and Sam Bonsi. You can read more about this initiative on the MacArthur website. You can also read about 2 investments that we made, a partnership with Rockefeller Foundation and their Zero Gap initiative in innovative finance, and a partnership with the Packard Foundation with the Terra Silva Fund, which works to preserve and protect tropical forests and combat climate change. There's also a report on the site that I would recommend, which comes from the consulting firm Tideline. Another great resource is called Beyond Trade-Offs, and that's a series from the Omidyar Network and The Economist. And I also want to share that Impact Alpha, which is a wonderful online journal that comes out daily, has run a whole series of articles related to catalytic capital, related to it in the context of the crisis and more generally. So I commend that to you as well. So let me just share a few examples that illustrate how catalytic capital is being put to work right now to address the current crisis in various ways. First, let me say that our longstanding frame for catalytic capital has focused on being flexible, patient, and risk tolerant, as I've mentioned. But what we're realizing is another really important dimension is speed. Now, maybe this is a form of being risk tolerant, but we think it's important to call out. And here are just a couple examples from the US. There was an investment made by the Ford Foundation to the Nonprofit Finance Fund to support nonprofits in essential healthcare, food delivery, homeless services, workforce development, educational support, early childhood education, and arts and culture. And Ford made that investment to help stand up that fund in just 1 week, right after the crisis began. The family office, Kenny Arth, in a matter of days, mobilized the Packard Foundation and others to invest in what are called community development financial institutions, CDFIs, that were specifically going to help bring federally backed small business loans to hard to reach rural areas. It was a really inspiring effort. The Gates Foundation, which also has long experience with catalytic capital, specifically in public health and around financing for vaccines and other medical technologies, they're harnessing their $2.5 billion strategic investment fund to help health systems in low and middle income countries, to look at rapid procurement of PPE, diagnostics, therapeutics, and other medical supplies. All of these are examples of the speed that catalytic capital can embrace. Now, even before new investments of these kinds get made, we can see the importance of catalytic capital in the context of investments already on the books. Modifying a loan to defer principal and interest, extending a reporting due date, adjusting covenants. These are things we can do as impact investors, and it's where speed comes together in a powerful way with both flexibility and patience, because we're deferring payments that we might receive currently to give organizations relief and running room and a peace of mind. And these are organizations, we have to remember, that are usually being affected greatly by the crisis at the same time that they're stepping up their impact and their response in major ways. So this was a top priority for us at MacArthur right as the crisis began. And we made our first emergency modifications by the end of March. And I know colleagues at other foundations have been doing likewise. I expect the same is true among family offices and others. I also think that the very nature of the enterprises and the funds that we support, by definition, makes them deeply mission-driven, resourceful, and responsive. And catalytic capital is what allows them to be resourceful and responsive, as well as mission-driven. So I just want to share a few examples, and then I will move to some closing thoughts. These are examples from our own portfolio and from some organizations that we know of that are financed by other catalytic capital investors throughout the field. And I have really, really been inspired by them all. Two, right at home in Chicago, really kind of relate to Catapult's focus on technology and innovation. One is called NowPal. We've provided two loans to this organization. They're making it possible for care providers, rapid responders, and volunteers to refer people to emergency resources that have been validated and updated in terms of the service availability, and they have an online platform for this. They also offer a free tool to community-based organizations that allows them to text or email referrals for services. So they've taken their existing technology, which was a very sophisticated way of connecting healthcare providers to community-based resources, and they've oriented toward crisis response. Another is an innovation center called mHub, which has done a whole bunch of things to mobilize around the crisis. And again, we provided a catalytic capital investment to this organization through a participation agreement. mHub has a group of entrepreneurs and engineers that are collaborating to produce PPE. This has included an open source face shield design for use by anyone. They have a group of entrepreneurs, engineers, and product designers that are working with clinicians and manufacturers to deliver a range of life-saving technologies, including a ventilator solution, a reusable mask, an air purifying respirator device, and a UVC sanitizing bulb. Whole bunch of great stuff that is coming out of mHub. In the community development space, which was a focus for MacArthur for almost 30 years, one of our longtime borrowers and real leaders as a CDFI is called Self-Help. In 2 weeks' time, they mobilized over 50 staff to deliver $150 million in very small loans to nonprofits, to businesses led by immigrants, and to businesses led by people of color and women. This was a massive effort, and it is also something that has gone on across the country among the more than 1,000 CDFIs that work to provide capital to underserved markets. So we are just really, really proud of the work that Self-Help and many other CDFIs have done. I want to share 3 more quick examples. One is in housing. This is another big field for MacArthur for many, many years. And we have been so inspired by the ways that nonprofit housing developers, whose mission is to serve low-income residents, frail elderly, the formerly homeless, veterans, the people that are most likely to struggle in a crisis like this. They are not only providing the housing to these residents at a time when their rent revenues are falling, their cleaning costs due to COVID are going up, but at the same time that they're facing those hardships, they're delivering literally thousands of meals to their residents so that they can shelter in place. They're raising funds for laptops for families who have children that can't otherwise go to school online. And they're bringing healthcare on site to their properties. Again, leveraging their infrastructure to respond quickly and in a meaningful way. We see the same thing in the global context. There's a fantastic nonprofit called 1 Acre Fund that's well known. They've used their supply chain to get soap, to get health education and other support to thousands of smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. And finally, there's a fund in India that we know, and they are focused at that intersection of tech and impact. And the startups that are in their portfolio have done things also that relate to the crisis. They have one that has innovative cold chain technology that's being deployed to move diagnostic kits. They have another company that's using thermal cameras to spot people with fever in a crowd as opposed to scanning each person individually. And yet another company in their portfolio is using their technology in a mobile version so that doctors can see patients safely through telemedicine. These are just a few examples, and all of them reflect the power of impact investing in our view, and even more so catalytic capital. So let me just close with a few quick takeaways. I think one, I'm really struck by the power of building purpose-led, but also financially resilient institutions and enterprises. Self-help that I mentioned took 30 years to get to the scale that they are at. This takes patience and intention. It takes special forms of investment, and it needs to be about building the potential to maximize impact over the long run, so that at times when that profit maximization might not be possible or needs to be set aside, they can stay focused on their impact. A second thing I would just mention without delving into is that policy is an important backdrop for all of this and a continuous process. This takes grants, not impact investments. But all of the big things that are happening right now need to harness and unlock the power of public policy to steer funds in ways that really reach the people that need the most. So we need to not forget the policy is a piece of the puzzle. And then finally, I want to say that I'm really struck by how important it is going to be to stay in and even double down, even at times when others may retreat. And that's not just for the COVID-related pandemic crisis or this broad economic fallout, but perhaps most of all, I think this applies when we think of climate, because we know that investors may be withdrawing commitments. Folks may be stepping away to protect their funds. They aren't set up to weather these kinds of storms. But impact investors, and especially those of us dedicated to catalytic capital, our whole MO is to work in risky and uncertain conditions. So a couple last thoughts. I think we really need to find a way to embrace the both and of addressing the pandemic, but also be bold in tackling the climate crisis and other issues that continue to demand our attention and our effort. And this includes, for me, finally, the racial and ethnic disparities that the crisis has laid bare and profoundly worsened. For us at MacArthur, these disparities demand capital that is not just purposeful about bridging gaps, but also to advance justice itself. That has been our aim for 40 years through our impact investments and all our work, and it will continue to guide us in the years to come. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share some of our experience and our perspective, and I look forward to meeting you in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you, Debra. So many insights, resources that you have shared over the last 15 minutes. And we're getting a lot of requests for sort of names, the data, the companies, the organizations that you have referenced. So we've shared your program portion of your website on Catalytic Capital, but we should sort of ensure that we can gather the names of the companies and the examples that you referenced, and we can circulate those on our website afterwards.
That sounds good.
So as Debra said, we do have an opportunity to dive into more Q&A with her, and she is going to be joined by Isabel Julia Thomsen from the Stiftelsen, a Norwegian foundation that is also an impact investor. So crossing the Atlantic virtually, bringing you together in the Catapult Cloud to go deeper on catalytic capital and your approaches. But for now, thank you, Debra. That was perfect. And as we had put catalytic capital on the agenda, and how timely that we had wanted to do that. And as you say, the need is omnipresent around us. So for this type of capital right now. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.